Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte. I sat down with the Virginia Republican to get his take on the chances for a compromise. 68 votes in the U.S. Senate for the immigration bill. Tell me why that legislation isn't the answer to America's immigration problems.
It isn't the answer because it doesn't address the concern that many of us in the House have that we're repeating the mistake of 1986 when we gave an easy pathway to citizenship to about 3 million people and then promised to put in place all kinds of enforcement, employer sanctions, better border security, and so on, and it never happened in the way that people visualized it. In the Senate bill, they give a legal status to 11 million people virtually immediately before they put in place E-Verify to check on whether people are lawfully accepting jobs with employers, put in place an entry-exit visa system to know that people who entered the country legally, and therefore the border is not relevant to the enforcement there, but entered legally and then overstayed, we don't know whether they've left or not. And more needs to be done with border enforcement, but none of that will take place until after they've already been given the legal status.
So your biggest problem with it is the timing here, that pathway to citizenship just comes too soon in the process?
No, it's not a pathway to citizenship. That comes later. The legal status comes immediately. And we think that most people who are not here legally, that's the main thing they want. They want to have a legal status here, and that's a worthwhile objective. But we think it shouldn't happen until you have the assurance that we're not going to have another wave of illegal immigration occur ahead of time.
So you had 14 Republican senators. They're spending $46 billion on border enforcement, 20,000 new Border Patrol agents, and the legislation cuts the deficit by $175 billion over 10 years. That's still not good enough for Bob Goodlatte?
It's not good enough for most Republicans in the House, and it wasn't good enough for most Republicans in the Senate, who are focused on making sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of 1986. And one of those is, what kind of interior enforcement of our laws do we have? None of those things are going to be in place when those 11 million people get their legal status. They can then later on get a pathway to citizenship if they choose, and I object to that too, because that pathway to citizenship is something that people who've gone through the process legally do not have the opportunity to have, and people who come here illegally get that special pathway to citizenship. So,
can any pathway to citizenship pass the House with a majority of House Republicans?
Perhaps this. If you gave them a legal status after you have E-Verify up and operating on a mandatory basis, after you have the entry-exit system, after you have the border better secured in a couple of years. And we can vote on all this now, but I would say then you get the legal status after these things are in place, and you get only a legal status. But the legal status would give them the opportunity to work anywhere they want to travel in and out of the United States, back to their home countries if they want to start their own business. It would give them many, many opportunities, but it wouldn't give them something that people who have historically immigrated to the country legally don't have, and I don't think they should have it.
So July 10th, when the House Republicans meet as a group after this recess, John Boehner said that meeting is going to decide the path forward. Are we going to see a vote on some final legislation from the House by the August recess?
It will be very important that in that meeting, Republicans reach some kind of consensus about how to move forward, and we'll be very active in presenting what the committee is doing and what the committee could do moving forward. But I would urge my colleagues to make sure that they get it right, that they do it through regular order so that the bills are examined carefully. All of those things are important to this process, more important than saying we get something done by the August recess or by the fall or whatever. We disagree with many of the provisions in the Senate bill, but we definitely agree that we have a broken immigration system. It needs to be reformed. And so rather than saying we want to kill the Senate bill, what we want to say is we want to write a better bill and then work out the differences with the Senate in conference.
Is the Gang of Seven still relevant here? They're working on a bipartisan proposal in the House of Representatives. Are you going to give them a hearing in your committee if they come up with a plan?
We have encouraged them from the day I became chairman to continue their work. We would love to see them produce a bipartisan bill or even parts of this, particularly the legalization part that we haven't produced a bill on yet. We're very interested in seeing what kind of consensus can be developed in the House on a bipartisan basis. But one of the problems we have right now is that many of the House Democrats are already saying we like that Senate bill better than anything the House would do, and therefore that's making it much more difficult for them to come up with a House piece of legislation that House Republicans could rally around and get enough Democratic support in the House to pass a bill, just like in the Senate they got, because of a bipartisan group, all the Democrats voting for something and then enough Republicans to pass the bill.
For those who suggest Speaker Boehner has to make a choice here, either keep his gavel or pass comprehensive immigration reform, what do you say to that?
He shouldn't have to make that decision. We should get it done right, and he'll be continuing on as a good speaker. But I do believe that he has set the tone for that by saying that this is an issue where we're not going to take the Senate bill up. We're going to do the House's will, and that he is going to recognize the importance of being the majority party in the House, which we're not in the Senate, and working the will of the majority party. And that, I think, is an important principle we'll take into that meeting on July 10th.
President Obama says he wants a final immigration bill on his desk by the August recess.